visitors, a lot of staff. But the urbanism is important. And most, and I have no opinion about yours, I haven't seen it, but most are not sensitive to the urbanism. Just like the shopping centers I showed you, what's good for the village would be good for them, and I would, hopefully you can get that to work.
Could I ask one more question regarding the hospitals? Are the hospitals you're consulting, are they not-for-profit, so they don't pay property taxes, or do they pay property taxes?
I don't know. They probably don't, but I don't know. I do not understand that. I do not know. That's a good question. In the United States, we have 20 square feet of retail per person compared to the rest of the industrialized world. It's another challenge for the shopping center developer. We have, in most of the world, the U.S., we have way too much retail. We do not have too much retail in poor areas. South Memphis has 1 square foot of retail per person. We have too much retail in a lot of our Tony suburbs. But the developers are competing, and what happens when you have too much of a supply? Rents get driven down, they beat you up on the lease. It is a tough business. This is one of my favorite gimmicks. This is Chatham, Cape Cod, where I get to go with my family, and this store owner had the police chief paint the sidewalks to go right to his front door. Totally brilliant. So you cross the sidewalk and you end up right in the Mayflower shop, and while you're there, you might as well get something. Now, every shopping center developer, every shopping center architect has their own philosophy. If we had a room right now of 100 developers or 100 town architects that do shopping centers, we would have 200 strong opinions about how to do them right. Okay, they're very passionate. They all know everything about the business. But I would give you a test. Which of these two centers has the higher sales? One of them just went bankrupt, and one of them has sales 3 times the national average. And the stronger center is A. Center B, a Festival Market, just closed. There were dozens of these built. There was one in Kalamazoo, one in Flint. And this developer's philosophy and his architect's philosophy was make it very festive, put in ornamental railings, lots of plants and lights and columns. Even every brick paver was 3 or 4 color, thinking people will come and admire how creative he is, and then eventually go shopping. This developer, whom I worked for, Taubman, his philosophy was build a very high quality center, great materials, but only put the color on things you can buy. Everything else is vanilla. Even the railings are clear, so you can see from here up to there. And we study what people do. We know that people walk, in the U.S., they walk counterclockwise. You walk about 4 feet per second. And I learned, I know how to make you turn left, and I know how to make you turn right. I know how to make you stop, and I know how to make you walk fast. I completely know how to manipulate you in a shopping environment. I'm not proud of it, but I do. And we didn't put clocks in our malls because we found that at 4:30, people would see the clock and say, oh my gosh, they have to go home and let the dog out or something. So we don't put clocks in malls. Now, we apply these principles to cities because we want your city to outperform suburban malls. That's my mission. Now, what does every city put in the main street? Clock. Brick pavers, okay? Clock salesmen hate me. The average shopping mall in the U.S. has sales of $275 per square foot per year. That's the U.S. average. The average Main Street retailer has sales of $80 a square foot per year. Taubman's published average in their annual report last year was $675, 3 times the national average. This is important because rents are usually 8% of sales. So I can tell, I'm not that bright, but I can tell pretty quickly usually what the sales are by asking you what your rents are. And when people tell me, Bob, the rents are too high in our city, I say, no, your sales are too low. You're closing at 5 o'clock at night, aren't you? You're not open on Sunday. Did you know last year that 70% of sales occur after 5 o'clock at night in the U.S. or on Sundays? 70%. The last time my wife and I were here was on a Sunday, and we could not find a restaurant to go to. And not to knock you, but we could not find a place to go to. And that's when people shop today. That's when people eat. Well, I eat almost any time. Just like the architects have philosophies about how to do malls, there's philosophies about how to do the new town centers. Most of them are being built under the festival market model. This is what they look like, most of the new town centers. They're very ornamental, very expensive to build, and these don't pencil out. They cost too much to build per square foot. You cannot get rents high enough. These only worked like this when they got a big government subsidy. The New Urbanists, the group I'm with have adopted the Taubman philosophy, most of us. We build wonderful storefronts, wonderful buildings, simple, with old proportions. That window proportion was invented by the Greeks 4,000 years ago. But we make the public realm nice but simple. And so we're building town centers that are the same price as conventional shopping centers. The apartments are the same price per square foot as conventional garden-style suburban apartments. But the urbanism is awesome. And you don't need the brick pavers and the granite to have great urbanism because you have the urbanism. You have the space between the buildings. Now, everybody loves the small retailer, and I love the small retailer too. And it's fun to go there and look around. These people work very hard. We like to see at least a third of the businesses in any downtown be local retailers, and we like to see a third be regional retailers. But these retailers haven't a clue about how to run a business. Most of them, are retired from some other line of work. They work very hard. Most of them do not earn a living wage. I've seen their books. We consult with them. Most of them put money into the business every year, and they barely make their rent. This is a fellow we worked with in Baltimore named Andy, and Andy was closing his store after 9 years because the city, he blamed it all on the city building official. The city building official and zoning code administrator wouldn't give him permission for one more open sign. He said he needed one more open sign, otherwise he'd go out of business. So it was entirely the city's fault. And he told all of his customers, the city's horrible, blah, blah, blah. They're mean to me. They won't give me one more open sign. And so the city actually hired me to help Andy and some of his neighbors. And I said, Andy, let's go across the street and look at your store. He had never done that since he'd signed the lease 9 years earlier. And I said, Andy, what's your problem really? And he said, well, my real problem is that after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, nobody comes into my door. And okay, what do you do? And he said, well, the only thing I do is I close these blinds and I shut the door at 1 o'clock. And you tell me, why doesn't anybody come in my store? We said, well, why do you close the blinds? And of course, well, the Pepsi machine is here and it overheats with the afternoon sun. The city planner won't let me have dark tinted glass because he's mean. And so I have to close the blinds. Everybody knows that. What kind of out-of-town consultant are you? So we said, Andy, these are your problems, okay? You have dead plants. He had a dead mammal, a mouse in his window. He had dirty glass. His door was falling off the hinges. You had to grab it when you opened the door. He had all these things going on with his store, and his sales were about $60 a square foot. And plus, there's not a sign. No, can you guess what Andy does? He's a deli operator. And he said, well, I don't need a sign because everybody knows I'm Andy, the deli operator. We said, statistically, Andy, 20% of your neighbors move every year. So We helped Andy. We moved the Pepsi. I helped him move the Pepsi machine out of there. We washed the window. We planted flowers. For $175, we went in the basement. I found little French cafe tables. We put them out on the sidewalk and in the window. One of the oldest restaurant trick I know is you put tables in the window and then you sit really attractive women in the window. It works all the time. The ugly people, the older people like me, you sit in the back. So we did that for Andy. For $175, we tripled his sales. And, the rent was not the problem then. The zoning official was not the issue. It was really Andy. He just didn't know any better, and he tried hard. The national retailers hire people to do this. They know that this color of red causes a chemical reaction on the right side of your brain, the emotional side of your brain. It tells the left side of your brain that you should grab your wallet and buy something. And they know that when you go into the store, 9 out of 10 of you turn right. They know you like to walk counterclockwise. They know how you behave, and they do it to increase sales. They know you like this thing called the front and center table. The front and center table brings you in off the sidewalk. This is the basic diagram for a store. They have the front and center table. They get you off the sidewalk into the store. They want you to turn right to go along the outer edge of the store. These are the high-priced, most profitable items here, and then they want you to have the point of purchase, the cash register on the right side. They know that today that you want to have at least 5 things on sale when you go to any store. You expect it today. Remember Brooks Brothers? They only had 1 sale a year back years ago. Now there's 5 things on sale every day in a Brooks Brothers. Okay, most small retailers look like this. This is in Auckland. This isn't in Grosse Pointe, so don't worry. This tells the customer that they're going to get poor service, poor quality, probably some bacteria, and they shouldn't eat there. This is really cool. Very sophisticated cheese shop in London or in Scotland. It's right up to the high. The overhang is to push you up to the window. And this is, believe it or not, a rough area in Scotland. This is a rough area where they have, I don't know, what's rough in Scotland, maybe 1 assault a year or something. But they have some vandals that kept vandalizing the stores and putting graffiti. So this store owner every day hired someone, every day, a landscaper, to pick up the knocked over planters and plant new plants. Every day at 6 o'clock. Because every night someone would knock it over and put graffiti on it. And she knew that that was important to say, this is a safe place, I'm a good retailer, you're going to get your money's worth. On average, when people come to villages like yours, they feel like everything they buy is going to be 15 to 20% more than the mall. It's not true, but there's a perception. This is called the sign band. The purpose of the sign band is to stop your eye from roaming around up there. This is called the decompression zone, so you can go from one store to another. This is a wonderful little home accessory shop. Now, there's always a big issue about whether we should require all stores to be retail. And I know that's an issue here. And that came from me 20 years ago. I'm to blame for that. And I wrote articles about it, and we now have a new way of thinking about it. We now feel that the storefronts should look like storefronts. 70% glass, sign bands, etc., etc. But if it's a hair salon or real estate office or whatever, we're okay with that. We're let the market decide as long as it looks like a storefront. And what we don't like to see, and we make the office operate like a storefront. We don't allow dark tinted windows. We don't allow blinds that you shut and things like that. We expect good urbanism, but the uses can come and go. Now, this is Chicago. And in the United States right now, 80% of Americans live in urbanized areas. And 20% live in rural areas. Americans are moving to cities, and you have exactly in the gross points, what Americans want. They love this quality, at least 80% do. This is exactly what people are looking for, and the retailers know it. The strong retailers have urban models that are different than the suburban models, and they will come to places like this. The home builders know it. The home builders are now building homes like this for a third of the market. 33% of the housing market likes compact village houses. So they like single-family homes on small lots. A third of the market hates it, and they want to live on a half-acre lot out in Rochester Hills or Macomb. And a third isn't sure. Currently, only 1% of the new housing construction is for the small lot home. And the problem is that when we build them, we've done all of the ones that have been built in Michigan. When we build them, they get hyperinflated because there's a 1% supply for 33% demand. By 2030, there's going to be a demand in the U.S. for 15 million more townhomes. And there's some wonderful townhomes right behind the old Jacobsons that we saw. There will be a demand for 15 million more, a demand for 40 million more small lot homes, and there's going to be an oversupply of 23 million. We'll have 23 million too many suburban Bigfoot homes. Those homes are expected to drop in half in value by 2030. Their kids, many kids that are growing up in Macomb Township or Rochester Hills, don't want to raise their families there. And their parents don't want to live there. There's always going to be a demand for it. But the big growth is in villages like yours. They like this kind of home. The risk is that we can build these neighborhoods, and we've done all of them. We did Cherry Hill, we did Westwood, and we've done a lot of them. The problem is that when you put someone into a small lot, compact home, if you don't give them stores and restaurants they can walk to, they feel cheated. Because these homes cost more per square foot, you have less privacy, and you have smaller lots. And the trade-off is, which you have in the village, the trade-off is you get a little smaller lot, maybe a little older house, maybe your garage door doesn't work or whatever. But in exchange for that, you can walk to places. When we build these new without something to walk to, they always fail. This is one we're doing right now up in Interlaken in northern Michigan. Believe it or not, I went here expecting to plan, this is for the village, we expected to plan acre lots because they're, everybody is Paul Bunyan up there. And the realtor said, no, we want village lots. That's what the demand is for. This is one we did in Novi. This is one we have built in Beverly Hills called Westwood. And this home sold for X. He built 28 homes, and this home sold for 2 times X because of the pent-up demand. This is called an English close, by the way. This is one we're planning up in northern Michigan right now on a lake. We're planning a whole village. There's a remnant of a historic village there now. We're planning an entire village, and we expect to see very hyper prices and commercial properties up there. Shoppers expect this when they come to your shopping district. They want flowers, clean sidewalks, new benches, no graffiti, good lighting, which you have. You have all these things. This tells them they're getting good service. This was the shopper back in the 90s. She was a woman who was 35 to 50. She loved to go to the mall. She went to the mall 3 times a month, and her main social activity was shopping. She liked to shop and play bridge. And she would put on her best dress, go to the mall, and go to every store. And I know because I used to be towed along behind my mother. This is the shopper today, her daughter. Her daughter hates to shop. She's got a chip on her shoulder. She's got a bad attitude. And she's a single parent or in a two-income family. And when she shops, it's a duty and a chore. It's not leisure. And so when she shops, she wants to go to stores that she knows, and she's doing it in between two other things, coming home from work before she takes the kids to the soccer game. And she does a lot of shopping in a short period of time, and she shops at night. 70% of shopping is after 5 o'clock at night. So her mother spent this much per visit and this much time per visit. The shopper today spends this much, I'm sorry, I had them reverse. Her mother spent this much time and spent this much, and the daughter spends that much. The daughter is spending more money in 20 minutes than her mother spent in 2 hours. Because of that, the shopping center community invented the Lifestyle Center. The Lifestyle Center is a fake town. They were invented about 20 years ago. We have one in, what's the one in Macomb? Partridge Creek. And there's one in Village of Rochester. These work because you have shops that people like, and you can park right in front of the shop and go on your way. These were very successful initially. Today they're stalling when they were built without department stores and without streets. You have to have the street for the convenience. Otherwise, you're really a mall without a roof. They have 7% of market share. This is one in Florida. Now, downtowns, this is Petoskey. Downtowns and villages like yours can have that advantage. Just like a lifestyle center, you can park, you can go in and out of the store, and you can go on your way as long as you have the other principles. Men, by the way, hate to shop, and as far as we can tell, most men haven't liked to shop since at least the caveman days. When they do shop, they usually stand in front of the door, protecting it and guarding it from letting other men in. That's their main job. No, actually, men do shop sometimes, and when they go in, they shop differently. They like it when you put everything on one hanger, so they can get in and out of the store before another man sees them. That's their biggest worry. And but they shop differently in villages. They will park in parking decks. They will walk around the corner and see and go shopping. They will shop in cold or rain. They will walk on uneven surfaces. Women are differently. Most women like to see the front door from their car. They want that convenience. They don't want to walk around the corner. Office workers shop. On average, each office worker, and the hospital employees will do this, on average, each employee supports 25 square feet of restaurants and retail. Each office worker and each hospital person supports 25 square feet. So if you want to be sustainable, you do need office. And office is a great use because they use it in the daytime, and you can use the parking, and you can use the same stall in the evening. It's a perfect use for downtowns. Now, why don't you have more retail here? There's lots of reasons. One reason is you're probably not part of the ICSC network. This is the shopping center group, and twice a year they get together at a big conference. This is the one in Las Vegas. There's one in New York. About 50,000 of them get together. You have 20,000 brokers, 30,000 retailers, and some developers. They ring a bell, and they all sit down and they do speed dating. And like every 8 minutes, they sign a new lease. Well, they're doing that with shopping centers. Very few cities are there. This year, they're actually introducing cities to come there. Tourists love to shop. We do a lot of work for major resorts around the country, around the world. And tourists, number one thing they do with their time is shop, even when they go to a big theme park. And the number two expenditure is shopping. Tourists plan their entire trip around shopping, and in Detroit, I've done the research, they're going to Birmingham. They're not coming here. They should be coming here. you have more retail shopping here than they do in Birmingham. You have a very great destination. You could become a major destination for tourists. Tourists, though, like to shop at national brands. This is Capri. We found, for example, in Capri, they have all these Italian stores. The longest line was for Ralph Lauren Polo, believe it or not. And people were standing in line 35 minutes to buy the same polo they could buy in Atlanta. And when I asked this lady, why are you buying a polo? Don't they have polo in Atlanta? She said, of course they do, but I'm buying it as a gift. And they can take it back, and I know what size that fits. I know what color they like. Now, tourists like to buy brands they know in historic buildings or unique settings. They love this. They love the assurance of the brand in a unique setting. Here's a Talbot's in Connecticut. This is a home run. This makes my wife shake, I think, when she sees this. Now, tourists love to shop at local places too, as recreation. They like to go into all the little shops, talk to you, have you talk about their grandchildren, but they don't really like to spend there. It's not fair, but they like to do most of their spending nationally. Now, locals can do things to get the tourist spending, but it's pretty challenging. Charleston has the nicest balance. Charleston's tourism spending is unbelievable. The basic format for a shopping center, the business model, is anchor and shops. This is called gross leasable area. You usually have twice the amount of GLA as the square footage of the anchor. It's hard to build a center over 30,000 square feet. I'm sure that the Village had a big loss in sales when Jacobson's closed. I know in Birmingham, our retailers lost 30% in sales when Jacobson's closed the next month. I know that for a fact. And that's the national average. 30% of the shoppers in any regional mall usually came there because of the department store. You know, every weekend, Macy's has the once-in-a-lifetime sale that they'll never have again that you have to go to. So these shops usually pay twice the rent as the anchor. Anchors pay very little rent. Instead of rent, they spend hundreds on advertising, hundreds of thousands. And you can't have one without the other. A lot of cities and a lot of my new urban friends have codes saying no anchor bigger than 5,000 or 10 or 20,000 feet. That's a mistake. Anchors need to be what they need to be. But you should require good urbanism. You should require lots of glass, clear glass. You should require the building up to the front if you have on-street parking. And these anchors spend a lot of money to bring people to these shops. Here's the anchors in Chicago. This is a department store in Dublin, Ireland. They took an entire block, carved out the interior, and built a modern store on the inside. This is the newest thing. They're taking massive department stores and wrapping them with small shops. So you have the urbanism of lots of shops and then the department store. This is out of my book. So you have the urbanism of shops and then the department store. You have big parking lots. This is a Kroger that we worked on in Birmingham when we worked on the master plan with Dewani. I'm sure you've seen it. We got Kroger to turn and rotate on its side to have small shops there. This is interesting. This was the first Village concept they did, and we had to go to Cincinnati and really plead hard with Kroger. We took their normal store and rotated it 90 degrees. But we didn't put in the city code. We wanted shops here. We didn't put in the code that these doors had to be unlocked. And we didn't put in the code that the windows couldn't be covered over. So as soon as they opened, the manager locked all the doors on the shops, killed the urbanism, put up paper over the windows. So we had a blank wall. And when I asked him, why did you do that? He said, well, I want people to walk past the Krispy Kreme stand on their way to get a coffee. Don't you know anything? You're just an urban planner. Well, you know, that might be good for him, but it's bad urbanism. in Birmingham, when we did the master plan, everyone says, well, you know, what's so good about Birmingham? And there's good and bad about it. But at the time we did the plan, it was in a downward spiral. It was just getting killed by Somerset. And Birmingham at the time had a one-story zoning code, and they counted the basement. So we actually had a negative one-story zoning. So you could build the basement, but nothing higher than the ground. So, so nothing was getting built. So, you know, we asked developers, why aren't you building anything? And they said, well, you know, we need taller buildings. And what we do in our master planning, and I know McKenna was part of, McKenna is your planner, John Jackson is here, I think. We asked the developers, what do you need? They all said we need 5-story buildings. The city said we only want 4-story buildings. So our code was, you can build 5 stories if it looks like 4. You can build 5 stories, and it's an option. We left the negative 1-story zoning in place. It's impossible to change zoning, even if you, whatever you want to do, even 1 comma. So we left the existing code in place, and we said there's an optional code that should you choose as a developer, you can build 5 stories if you make the building out of stone and brick, if you make the first floor high ceilings with all glass and retail, if the upper level is housing, if you build exactly what we want, we'll give you a 500% bonus. And that's a market-based plan. That's really what happened to Birmingham. I did something wrong. Birmingham had about 1 million square feet developed in 3 years because of that code. It's unbelievable. It now has 3 million square feet of commercial. Let me take a break here. Whoops. I'll speed this along. So, a little anecdote about Birmingham is the code went through very quickly. The community, who had never agreed on anything in generations, agreed on the code. But when the steel went up for the first building, for the Willits building, it shocked so many people. They said, what do you mean building a 5-story building? When we didn't think you were serious. And they recalled the city commission. And after the building was built, they said, what a beautiful building. Why did you resign from the city commission? And they voted on them back in. It's interesting. By the way, your Kroger, I think, is one of the best in the country. And you should be given a lot of, you should pat yourselves on the back for it. I don't know if McKenna had a lot to do with this. I'm sure they did. But it's brilliant. It's a great store. It's one with the door on the street. It's got a lot of clear glass. I show this all over the country as the ideal village model. And I think you're lucky to have them. I just did a study in the Hamptons and found that a grocery store increases sales of other stores by 20 to 25%. That's a well-documented fact. And unlike the Hamptons, and I don't want to be political, and I don't know anything about the Kroger, but if Kroger needs to expand or if they need to have some modification, you should realize that they are a store, an anchor like that is an important contributor to your downtown. I remember when Jacobson's, before they closed in Birmingham, 2 years before, came to our city council and said, we have 3 stores, men's, women's, and children. We want to combine in one and build a 2-story store. The city commission, and I was at the meeting, said, I don't like Jacobson's. I don't shop there. Why don't you leave town? I was at the meeting. I heard it with my own ears. They said, okay. And they left. Had they built, even if they had gone out of business, we would have had a department store It maybe could have been a Macy's, maybe a Lord & Taylor, maybe a Bloomingdale's, who knows. This is a new form for Home Depot. Now, the average shopping district is 1,000 feet long, and you go basically 1,000 feet from Anchor. I don't know how long the village is. The average man, when he shops, not to be sexist, usually parks in the first space. He will park in a remote lot, gets out of his car, runs to the store, and runs home. His wife, on the other hand, will always park in the same aisle. They park the same aisle their whole lives. And while they're there, they'll just happen to make a couple of stops and get something for the husband. I got a kick out of this. This was in the ICSC, the shopping center bulletin the other day. Developers have finally said planners were right all along. And good urbanism is good for business. But on the other hand, good commerce is good for urbanism. They're not exclusive. This is the new Target store, a half-size Target store. And on-street parking, I heard you talk about parking. On-street parking is necessary for on-street retail, and I compliment you for having on-street parking. Many cities have gotten rid of it, and for having the old-fashioned parking meter. Parking meters, like them or not, are necessary on street. And we estimate that every stall provides about 150 to 200,000 a year in sales. Every on-street stall turns about 20 to 25 times per day, and every on-street stall equals about 10 off-street stalls. It's very important to have it. And many cities don't want to see meters, but they actually are very effective. The new towns we build, this is one in California, have meters. We put meters in all of our new towns. We do not recommend these, and I hope you don't have these. Do you? Okay, don't buy them. They have a very slick salesperson who will talk you into them, because you do get higher revenues out of them. And you can let one of your meter collectors go. But shoppers don't like them. First of all, it requires an IQ over 70 to figure out how to use them, so that gets rid of half the shoppers. And they're hard to do. You have to park, you have to go here, read it, go back, and go back. We put some of these in Birmingham, and they painted the sidewalk with the number, and when it snowed, nobody could read the number. Now, the parking enforcement person loved that, but nobody else did. You have to have a lot of traffic. This is Bay City. This is the downtown, of course, 40,000 cars per day, no street trees. The downtown was killed when they put a bypass road around it, cut it from 40 to 4,000 cars per day. Chatham, Cape Cod, on-street retail needs on-street parking. You have that. Please keep it. A lot of cities right now have a form-based code. They're practicing this new science called form-based codes, where they want to build your village everywhere. These don't work when you build them on a highway. When you don't have on-street retail, you can't have on-street. When you don't have on-street parking, you can't have on-street retail. Most of the businesses just pull the knobs off the door. Birmingham, our main street, Woodward and Maple, has 44,000 cars per day at that intersection. But it's very walkable, very narrow, very urban. We have about 3 million square feet of commercial. Now, we do have a lot of problems. I fought this, but we put in a massive cinema in Birmingham. We are now an entertainment district for 3 counties, where every teenager in 3 counties, probably nobody from Grosse Pointe, but every teenager from 3 counties comes here and gets rowdy. And that has a negative impact on the office and the residential. And I think we're heading down a very bad, slippery slope. You have to balance entertainment with retail. We should be having more retail. Instead, the city is giving out liquor licenses like there's no tomorrow. And that's very common because the restaurants pay a lot of rent. And you can go through a cycle. Now, it's good to have restaurants. I'm all for relaxing, especially with the bistro laws. And I'm glad to hear you're having a new restaurant here. But there is a tipping point where if you become all restaurants and you lose your retail, you lose that critical mass. Right now, I don't know enough to give you a recommendation, but we are past the tipping point in Birmingham. And I've worked with cities in which it has tipped in 6 months. It's went from a great, thriving city to a dead, deserted city because of that. It can happen very rapidly. This is what happened in Birmingham with our plan. We got about over 1 million square feet developed in about 3 years, maybe too much, too fast. Houston failed because they got rid of their on-street parking. It's that simple. Charleston is probably the most sustainable city in the country. It has a trade area of 300 miles. I know soccer moms get in their car and drive 300 miles. This is what it looked like. This is what it looks like now. Their mayor, Mayor Riley, is a brand manager. He has very good taste, and he requires every store to be built to a high standard. I've seen that here. You have that level of standard here. You know, I recently did a job off the coast of Cape Cod on an island where I talked to a developer, and he said, you know, every morning I wake up cursing the building official and zoning guy for being so strict, because he always makes me do things to my buildings that I don't want to do. But every night I go to bed praying that he'll be there the next morning, because those high standards make my property worth more, and I want the people on both sides of me to do that. So I think I'm just about done here. I'm going to wrap it up here. I've got some case studies, but I think we're way over time. So the trend is to go to cities. You have exactly the urbanism, the neighborhoods, the schools, the recreational facilities, the brand that people are looking to live in, to work in, and to shop in. And I think there is a tremendous opportunity with you. And I would congratulate you on maintaining the high quality of life and the high standards that you have so far. It's always going to be a struggle. Developers have to risk capital. You have to work with them. But developers have to work with planners, because what's good for the city will eventually be good for the building and vice versa. But it's always going to be a challenge. It's easy in the mall because we own everything. It's easy in my new urbanism lifestyle centers because we control everything. But we get criticized because it's not real. It's fake. We lack the authenticity. We're trying to fake the authenticity now. We let in some really tacky storefronts every 12 stores, so it looks kind of real. But we can't do that. All right, so thank you for being so patient. I'm going to end it there.
Are there questions? I'm sure we got one. We got some.
I have a question. You mentioned the negative thing about a cinema, but what about like a boutique hotel?
There's no downside to boutique hotels. I think hotels are wonderful. It's one of our secret weapons in Birmingham. Hotels now love cities. They are fighting to get into our town centers. They get much higher performance. We highly recommend it. And I like cinemas that show the movies I like. You know.
I think I'd like to make a comment on a couple of things that Bob said. And one struck me because I didn't realize it. He said, correct me if I'm wrong, that we have better retail here than Birmingham.
Yeah, I think you do.
Okay? So
I think
it's
you do.
important, I think, for us to understand what we have and to build on what we have. And some of what we don't have is some of the things that we all talk about. I'd love to have a hotel. The city's tried to bring one in, okay? I'd love to have more residential. We've got 2.5 acres sitting there where the Morningside or whatever they were project was going into. I'd love to see more offices. I think I look out at the audience and I talk about office use all the time. It's not permitted as much as you might think it should be in the village. And I think we need to have offices to support the stores and to support the restaurants. And I think you agree with that.
I do.
So I think all of us working together have learned something today, and I hope we can move forward. Do you have any questions of me, by the way?
Can I just interrupt for 1 minute? This is a community in many ways similar to you. It's called West Hartford, Connecticut. And this is the newest trend in shopping centers, is to surgically build new buildings around existing parking lots and underutilized parcels. So they're taking like the village of Rochester and seamlessly putting it into a town so that you have the best of both. And I think you probably have the opportunity for some expansion like that here. This is my book, by the way, if you want to spend a lot of money. I get $3 royalty per book, so please.
You got a question over here.
I'd like your opinion on parking lot versus parking structure.
I'm okay. I like parking I like parking structures. I think they're necessary, especially for long-term users like office workers. The parking structures that work best, though, that I've seen have the first 2 hours free. Naples does that. Birmingham does that, with the meters being expensive on street. So you can support almost all of your retail demand with on-street parking if you get that 10 turns per day. Mm-hmm.
So to support that 2 hour free,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't Birmingham have a parking assessment that the district
Mm-hmm.
covers?
They built 5 garages with a parking assessment, but when they went to 2 hours free, the revenue went up $1 million the first year because people that never parked in garages, went there for free and said, this isn't all that bad. And then they really clip you on the 3rd hour. So, I mean, it's a really sophisticated policy. But to be able to park in front of the store for $1 or 50 cents is so invaluable to that time-stressed customer. Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts when you're in a downtown, angle parking versus parallel?
You get twice as many cars with angle parking as parallel, but it's impossible to cross the street, and it's weaker urbanism. And I'm very critical of Birmingham. We're turning our best streets into parking lots with angled parking. And I think they look like hell. But you do get more parking. So that's a community values decision for you to make. We're taking Pierce Street, one of the best streets in the Midwest. It's got City Hall on it, whacking off all the green around the City Hall and putting in diagonal parking to get 3 more stalls. Shameful.
I have heard people say that because we are right up against the lake, that has an impact on our service radius, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been some of the excuse that sometimes comes up for why we can't attract larger retailers or
Right.
national retailers. Do you have any thoughts on that?
There is truth to that. Fish don't shop. We know that for sure. But that does affect your trade area. But on the other hand, you have a fairly well-defined market that has to drive an extraordinary distance for their shopping. And I've done market research here. You have a lot of potential. But it's hard. You need predictability. It's the things that Jim was talking about. I don't know your business model, but it's really hard to get retailers. Retailers are scared of Michigan. They're coming around, but it's challenging.
Somebody wrote something in the Voice of the Village Facebook.
This is
I
Naples
thought was
parking.
important. Do you know how many retailers of a national level we have? I mean, we have 2 anchors. We got a Kroger, 3 anchors really. We got a Kroger, we got a CVS, and we got a Trader Joe's. Okay, we have only about a third, and I'm guessing now, of our retailers are of the homespun variety. Everybody else is a national. Moose Jaw is a regional. Talbot's, the Loft, Chico's, down the line, Starbucks and the Caribou's and the ice cream park. Those are all nationals. So when I look here and I visit my daughter in Palo Alto, I don't see a lot of difference. I really don't. It's a little bigger, it's a little more affluent, but the mix is there. And the things that we do, the things that I was talking about, the music on the plaza, the sidewalk sale, the Village Fest, these are things that other communities do too. And forgive me, I apologize for saying this, but sometimes I wonder whether we in Grosse Pointe know what we have. And it's a pretty remarkable thing. And it's not just us. It's the hill and it's the park. So your job, our job is to do what we have to do. Your job is to go out there and tell your neighbors, you know what, we have something special. Let's start supporting it. Because if we don't support it, we will lose our stores. The independents and some of the nationals are hanging on by their fingertips. So we need to work together, and that's why what the DDA is doing, that's why what we're trying to do as the voice of the village is to create an awareness. The public relations firm that's being hired, we need to make people understand what we have. And I've talked too much, and I thank you. Margie,
Yeah, I just
you
wanted-
started all of this, but go ahead.
I just wanted to ask,
She did.
I heard a gal speak yesterday about the Midtown, all the development that's going on in Midtown. It was amazing. I was.
It's you, right?
overwhelmed.
Midtown.
Talking about the Gilbert stuff.
Oh,
downtown.
I haven't done the Midtown. I've been working further down by
Will
Campus
that
Marshes.
affect our community? Does that help our community?
I think, yeah. I think you having, well, I think, first of all those people moving there
Right.
are going to want, the drive time here is unbelievably quick. But it remains to see what they're going to do. I mean, it could, they're going to have, I think Mr. Gilbert announced a Moose Jaw at his last hearing. It's just different markets. You do have potential. You should become a must-see for all the out-of-town visitors to this region, I think, if you want. I mean, our job usually is to tell communities what your market potential is, how to get there, not to tell you what to do. I can show you how to dial it down to be even smaller. I can tell you how to dial it way up. And that's our job. Now, you tell me where you want to set the dial.
I got a question. What's your opinion on an ordinance that tells you this block in the same business district can only be 2 stories, the next block 3 stories, the next block 4, and then going back down?
I can't comment on that specific ordinance, but I do think it is good to have form-based kind of planning that's well thought out. But I cannot comment on that. It is good to have a plan and stick to it. I know Mayor Riley will tell you in Charleston that I accepted a plan 20 years ago and I stuck to it. And all of my friends said, why don't we do this? Can I do 2 more stories here, 1 more story here? Nobody ever offered me a bribe, he says. They just wanted to change the plan. So I stuck to it. And I'm glad I did. And there's some things that I would have done differently, but he stuck to it. Someone had a question I ignored.
Charleston's on the water, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're 180 degrees of
Right.
retail is on the water. How are they thriving? Is it more of a destination resort? Destination?
Charleston, it's interesting. Charleston was, I showed the old pictures of it. It was devastated. Charleston's, in fact, it's a peninsula. So it's a cul-de-sac. You have to go out of your way to get there. Charleston has the 300-mile trade area because of its urbanism. In my opinion, it's because Mayor Riley meets with Mr. Developer and says, Mr. Smith, you and I are friends, but I want your building to look like this, and I want this kind of sign and this kind of awning. And Mr. Smith says, what a good idea, Mr. Riley. I was just thinking of the same thing. And he does it. And I don't know how he does it. And I think he's responsible. But, everyone says, well, it's Charleston. Of course it's good. And people say that about Naples. But when we did the study for Naples 25 years ago, I don't know if you were ever there, it closed at 4 o'clock. We found a demand for 40 restaurants in Naples 20 years ago. People said, don't even pay this guy from Detroit. He's nuts. Because they said everyone goes to the yacht club. Who's going to eat who's going to eat after 4 o'clock when you don't get the blue plate special at Red Lobster when you have to pay full price? And, you know, the market's here. You have that market here. I'm pretty sure you do. But you're not part of the loop. You probably won't be at the ICSC. You know, there's going to be thousands of deals done in a few weeks at the Recon show in Nevada.
When is the next one?
The next big one's in New York in December.
September?
December in New York. And New York is where the business is done. Las Vegas has been big parties, and then they'll say, okay, I'll call you when you get back. But you should decide, in my opinion, what your potential is. From that, what do you want to be? And then go get it. In Birmingham, we were a town. They decided they wanted to become a city. And they stuck to that. And you may say, we're a village, we'd like to be a town, or we're a town, we'd like to be a small city. You decide.
But there is a tipping point, and just 1 second, Bob. I want to ask David a question. When you opened up Forest Grill in Birmingham, how many restaurants were there?
We started in 2008. We started in 2008, August of 2008. We were the 18th restaurant. Today, I thought it went over 50.
So they went, 18 restaurants, they were the 18th, and over the course of 5 years, there were how many?
There's over 40 or 50 now.
And some of them have closed, right?
Yeah, there's been transitions between the restaurants.
So we are getting to a tipping point.
There is a tipping point.
Okay, so we've got we're going to have 2 great restaurants, white tablecloth restaurants, in the village, and what the Cottons are doing in the park is fabulous, and we're going to have a couple there, and we're going to have a couple on the hill, and that's great, and we've got Sheila's, and we've got Side Street, and we've got Panera, and we've got all these other places. What we don't have is we need to expand in our view, the residential, close by, the office, and we got to attract more retailers.
It is so refreshing to drive here from Birmingham, and walk around, enjoy yourself, walk through your neighborhoods. It's a very nice experience.
Bob, I shut you off. Do you want to say something?
I want to say a couple things in support of what's already been said. The gap was my tenant for 28 years in a very old, tired building that the Bestman Company built 80 years ago. So the gap is moving out. I called them right away, and I literally offered them rent that was 30% less than what they paid when they moved in 28 years before.
Oh.
They said, no, we know that Grosse Pointers shop more at our Somerset store than they do in the village.
Hmm.
The manager of the store always told me they do, and then they'd come back and return it in Grosse Pointe.
Oh.
So I just would like to make a comment to everybody that we need to support the village. My father was in the grocery business here for decades back and closed the store down in the mid to late 50s and kept the Birmingham store for 47 years because the Birmingham people spent their money and the Grosse Pointers did. I'm afraid we've got a reputation here of shopping more when we're on vacation, because we all vacation a lot, and we really need to support our downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big factor that we've heard too as we've explored. We go to talk to some of the big retailers and we talk to them. It's not like we've not reached. And they say, well, I can tell you within $1 how much money people with the 482